Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you're all well. It's Friday, baby. It's Friday. Thank Crunchy. It's Friday. What a week. What a week. But we made it, and you looking absolutely amazing for it, by the way. I must add that. Anyway, so we get into the meat and potatoes. As we are talking about something that I was asked, and we're talking about Bryan Kohberger, and I keep getting the same thing, and that is that I'm a Bryan Kohberger supporter. Only in 2024 can we have people on a platform that supports serial killers. Look, I don't support serial killers. I don't support Bryan Kohberger, and I've said this again. I've said this before. I'm just repeating myself now. And some people say you've been repeating yourself all the time for a long time, Ash. Bollocks. Look, there's people coming into this case daily, people who are just finding it. There's people who still ask me questions about things that have been covered hugely in depth. And while there is a demand for people to know information around this case, I will continue to provide it. If you don't like it, that's tough. Yes, we do need to talk about other cases, and we will do, I promise. But with respect of Bryan Kohberger, there is a fact, and that is that Bryan Kohberger is either innocent, because he still could be. At this moment in time, Bryan Kohberger, I know this is going to make some people go fucking crazy, Bryan Kohberger could be innocent. And we'll talk about that in a second. But he could also be guilty. The guy could be a killer. He could be an incredibly, incredibly dangerous person. Now, let's look at the innocent side of it to start with. He could be innocent. And why do I say he could be innocent at that stage? He could be innocent because the evidence that we have before us and what people still can't understand it, what people can't. I had someone a couple of days ago and they were talking in the comments and saying, yeah, the facts are in the PCA. But what they couldn't understand is about when they say the facts are in the PCA, for instance. There is nothing in the PCA that 100% points a finger at Bryan Kohberger to a degree where you can say, well, he's fucked then. He's absolutely fucked. We can turn around and say the DNA that sat on that knife sheath was in fact Bryan Kohberger's. Of course you can. You can turn around and say it's him, but it doesn't put him at the scene of the crime at the time it happened. It puts his DNA on a knife sheath. That's all that does. It doesn't do anything more. The white Hyundai Elantra, there is a huge problem with that white Hyundai Elantra. Not to mention the fact that it was reported originally to contain occupants. Not to mention that it was a different date than Bryan Kohberger's. And not to mention that what we, the public, have seen is not consistent with the words that is definitely Bryan Kohberger's car beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, could it later be proven that it is because there is additional footage? Yes. But what you also have to do then is you have to prove that when this crime happened is in correlation with when his car was in this area. Now, if all they've got is the footage that we've seen, they're going to struggle with that. Now, what they need is to show Bryan Kohberger on camera. They need to actually get Bryan Kohberger seen in the car or a plate of some description in the vicinity at the time that they believe the crime happened, but then they have to be able to prove that that is indeed when the crime happened. So it's not as easy as that. And when you talk about facts in the PCA, yes, there might be facts in the PCA, but a fact doesn't automatically prove guilt of somebody. It's just we saw what we believe is a white Hyundai Elantra and we believe it belonged to our client. That's a fact because they're saying we believe it's Bryan Kohberger's, but it's not a fact in the sense that it's definitely Bryan Kohberger's. Does that make sense? So even though you're right that the PCA does contain facts, those facts are not indicative of guilt. They're just not. They're indicative of circumstantial evidence that could later on progress to, yeah, he's guilty. It is indeed his car. He was there, so on and so forth. So look, he could indeed be guilty as well. You know, he could be guilty. And I could go on for days about why he could be innocent. I could go on for days about why he could be guilty. Because at the end of the day, his DNA was found on a knife sheath. So you do have to explain how that DNA got there. Now, there's only so many options. Was it planted? Could it have been planted? Is that absolutely beyond the realms of possibility it could be planted? No, sadly, it's not. I wish I could sit here today and say things like that just don't happen. They don't plant. It's never been planted evidence. You can trust law enforcement. Absolutely, undeniably, 100% of the time, that's bollocks. You just can't. Sorry. And obviously, we could see digital evidence of behaviours that would be indicative of guilt. You know, if they can indeed prove and show that he was stalking them online. We don't have proof of that yet. We do not have it yet. But if that later does transpire that this is what he was doing, and this does turn into a digital trial, then so be it. That's just the world that we live in. Now, again, with respect of the DNA being there, again, I can't hammer home enough that the DNA being on that knife sheath doesn't automatically mean guilt. As soon as DNA is in the equation, that can cause people to behave and act in a certain way, and they can just run with things. And even law enforcement can think, "Oh, we've got it. This is it. We've got what we need." And that can kind of cloud their judgment on other things. I've spoken to law enforcement in this country, and they have confirmed that exact thing, that sometimes when they've got that, things can then start to go very, very wrong as they think, right, his DNA's there, it must be him, and we can now start building a case around this. We just need to prove it. And that's kind of how this case has been. We almost feel like it's being reverse manufactured to fit Bryan. And that generally comes from either a tip, someone's tipped them off. And I must say, the tip must have come from Washington University. So if you think from a Bryan Kohberger's DNA perspective, could you imagine if it was a Washington University that rung that tip in? Where would Bryan Kohberger's DNA be for a start? It would be all over Washington because he was a marker of papers. It wouldn't take, could you imagine if it was one of Bryan's students? He marks their paper and he gives them a fucking F instead of an A, they get fucking bent up out of shape and they've got a problem with him, and that person just happens to be a fucking nutcase as well. So they go on and commit a crime, and lo and behold, he's delivered a slam dunk because he's eating grass his teacher up. He don't like. I'm not saying that's what happened, but I'm just saying that is something that can happen. It is, sadly. Touch DNA can be transferred around the block very, very easily. And there are issues with that DNA. But anyway, Bryan Kohberger could be guilty. There isn't a set way to look. There isn't a set way to behave. And maybe he is just an anomaly. He's someone who, he hadn't done anything previously. This was his first rodeo. And he just happened to be incredibly skilled with a weapon that, man, it just let him do the crime that we see placed before us in the time that we've been told it happened. Who knows? But yeah, one of two things is correct, and that is Bryan Kohberger is either guilty as charged or he is innocent. And that's it. I'll catch you on the next one.